So, my name is Danny. I'll introduce myself in a second. I actually have a slide for it, but what I'm going to be talking about is, as he said, Data Factory in 18 hours to 10 minutes, which will make more sense when I go through it. Me, myself, and I. I'm a SQL DBA at heart. That was what I worked for a company called Abelli, which is right by Central Station. But the infrastructure ends up being SQL DBA Abelli. They're quite small. So after 2 years in Amsterdam, you party, you have fun, and I wanted to learn more. So I went to Schuberg Phyllis. But how did I get to being even a DBA? I'll give you a quick intro into my life. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school. My mum, I applied to be a plumber, and that went down the drain. Everyone wanted to do craftsmanship and all that, and I got denied, which was like, okay. So mum I used to DJ and stuff, so she was like, why don't you do a music course? So I did 2 or 3 years of college, and in the background I was doing the first line support. Well, before that I actually worked in a shoe store and selling shoes. Then I went on to first line support, which was double pay, which sounded amazing. But you're just like call after call after call. I spent most of the time in the office being told off rather than actually doing my work because I was bored out my brains. So another manager came in, and luckily she was really nice. And why I was classed as new and developing still, I was training the whole department of how to do their stuff and writing their documentation. So they were like, okay, well, yeah, this guy has something up his arse. Let's do something better with him. So I ended up helping them fit stores, but as on the side, as well as answering phone calls. But then a job came up, and they were looking for a junior SQL DBA, and I had no idea what that was, but also the pay looked nice. So I was like, okay, well, this is handy. The night before, I said to my mum, yeah, I don't even think I want to do the interview. She was like, yeah, well, try it. What have you got to lose? So I went and did the interview. It was half an hour long, super simple, and the guy was like, yeah, we're going to hire him. I was like, fuck. I didn't want to do the interview, so I was like, okay. But I went along with it, and I really, really liked it. After 2 years, I wanted more money again. They weren't willing to pay, and I wanted to come to Amsterdam for a few months and thought, Abelli is looking for a SQL DBA. I could work there. I could live in Amsterdam. And I worked with them for about 4 years. I ended up sticking around. I love working in Amsterdam. Well, I don't live in Amsterdam anymore. I live in Leiden. But I love the culture in the Netherlands. So I'm now a MCE at Schuberg, which is a mission critical engineer. You're not a SQL DBA anymore. You end up being, I wear many hats, and one of them being within Azure. But I learned a lot, which was nice. So you end up being more of like a Windows DevOps engineer, all that. And the picture, why it's like this, I did a talk about the same thing what I'm going to do now with Microsoft. And my colleagues found it amazingly funny to make a GIF out of me. So yeah, that is me at Microsoft presenting this exact talk. We had a certain project that came in, and there was a different third party involved. I won't name names, give me another beer and maybe I will. But they got assigned the project for a customer, and the current situation was they had a report which they were running daily, and it was based on SharePoint, which was hosted on-prem by Schuberg, and also SSRS, but it was proper old school, and it took hours to run. So this third party came involved and was like, yeah, we can move it all to Azure. And they came up with this architectural design, and it was using Power BI Data Gateway. And I don't know if anyone's ever used it, but don't use it for the scenario that I'm going to give you, where you have maybe 200 million rows and 60 gig of data that you need to move in a few hours. This Power BI Data Gateway, it moved 4 megs per second with a gap every 4 seconds, because it was compressing the data and shipping it across. So after 18 hours, that's where the 18 hours come through, they were like, all our other processes are breaking, what's happening? Yeah, it was blocking the shit out of everything because it was trying to select, and they're trying to then do the inserts for the next day, and yeah, so I had to kill it. And that was my introduction to the project, like, okay, what is going on here? What are you trying to do? How is this thing running? So that's where it came to understanding the issue. What they wanted to do was ship all the data to Azure to have a Power BI online report and have that presented in SharePoint Online for their external customers. But the size of the data, why it was like that, because so many people wonder why every day you need such data influx. A very bad design from the beginning of a different third-party company. They refresh the whole database every day to get the correct mappings. Not the best way. You could obviously do now they're trying to revamp it to get the deltas and etc. But yeah, it is what it is. So I got stuck with that. So what did I do? I looked at many different options, and one of the ways to prove that it wasn't Schuberg at fault, because they all look at you, oh yeah, why it must be SQL which is slow. Well, fuck no. It was perfectly fine. I could move the data from an application server to SQL within about a few minutes using SQL query stress. You can put in your query in there and just hammer away like hell. So I was like, okay, well, SQL's fine. I then did Data Migration Assistant, and this was like my first step into Azure world. I was like, okay, now I need to move the data from on-prem SQL to Azure SQL. That took around 4 hours. So, okay, there you go. I've already improved your stuff by X amount of time. So the Power BI gateway was shoved out. So then Schuberg took hold, and the Data Factory was also mentioned. I did a Synapse course, and it was like a 4-day course I did. But that gave me insight into some of the products there. So I spoke to a few colleagues, and they were like, okay, Synapse seems way too much for what you're trying to do if you're trying to move data from left to right. So Data Factory was mentioned, and I was like, okay, I have no idea what it is. Let me try it out. So to get what I wanted to do, the Data Factory was there. You have a certain tool, let's say, called copy data, but there's a lot of different, let's say, settings you can change. And one of the best ways you can use it, what the Power BI Data Gateway was doing was just a single SQL query. But with Data Factory, you can split the table and split the query dynamically, which is pretty cool. I've never seen that done before. Other people may have, but I was like, okay. So I had the primary key of the SQL table, and I have a slide which will show a bit more what I'm actually talking about. And I could split to find out how many rows are associated with those IDs, etc., and split the query and go have at it. You can then limit that query to X amount of rows. So once it gets to 800,000 rows, trigger the next one. So then you can really do it parallel. Test, because yeah, that's what I had to do like crazy to see what I could do. But when I split the table, you have your IDs. So this is the table they had, and under all the IDs, you can see how many rows were actually associated to those IDs. So what you can do in Data Factory is do upper bound number and lower bound number, and set a number of how many queries you really want to run, and let it go wild, which I have here. So what you actually do, these are where you have a lot of the settings. You set where you want to put the source of the data. You can choose how you want to do it, if you want to set it to a certain table, a query, or store procedure. What I did, I had my own query because I didn't want all the columns to be brought in. They didn't need everything, so you can set whatever you want. And under that, you can do a dynamic where clause. So instead of saying where ID equals 90, you can say where ID equals, and it's like question mark or something. And Data Factory puts that in for you, which was fucking cool for me. I was like, wow, okay. So then I have my upper bound number of 90 and lower of 5, and I want to partition customer ID. So because I have a SQL background, I was like, okay, this is making sense to me. I can play around with these numbers and make it go crazy. So with that, I think I have another one here. Woohoo! Yes, I could change the degree of parallelism. And with that being 32, I had then 32 different SQL queries going towards the on-prem SQL. And that I think first run, I got it within about 20 minutes, and now tweaking with it, I've got it down to about 12, and I even had it running at 6, but then that's like all hell breaking loose, and the network guy saying, what the F are you doing? Like, calm down, you're breaking shit. But, and then also over here, you can see how many rows per file. So although I had 32 queries going at the same time, this actually helped me split it even more. And why I wanted to do this is we have 2 data factories, and one of them is ours and one of them is a third party. And the reason we did that was to split the ownership. If this one goes wrong, we know whose is whose. I moved the data now to a storage account, just a data lake storage account, and then they can pick it up from there. Yes, you can move it straight to Azure SQL, but we wanted a defined place where I didn't have to ship it always from on-prem. It can then stay in the storage account, and they can run theirs as many of the times, and then affecting what's going on on-prem. But some of the files I were creating were like 2 to 5 gig, 8 gig, depending on whether the ID fell in this where clause. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't good, because what they did was then do a loop on like the copied data activity you saw. They then generated like a ton of copied datas, which then did this exact same thing, but then into Azure SQL. So they did the same thing, but in a reverse. So if I could split that down rows per file, it didn't mean that one of their copied data streams was getting stuck at a 5 gig file and taking 40 minutes. Now they all ran at about like 3 minutes. So you had a ton of them running all at the same time, straight into Azure SQL. That is what I did there. And what you say, it's not at the end or not, because I'll explain why I say not. You can see 12 minutes, what I said, 18 hours, 12 minutes, woo! It picks up from source within 3 minutes, it writes within 6 minutes, and you see 290 million rows. That's 23 gig of data and 32 connections. So there's 32 SQL connections going on-prem. Only 2 connections going to the storage account, but I wrote 54 files, and the reason why it's 8 gig data written is because we also did it in Parquet file format to compress it. So, little sidestep, it doesn't just go Data Factory straight to on-prem SQL. You have integration runtimes in between. And you can, because we host them on-prem, you can do it in Azure VM or whatever. We hosted ours on-prem, we can beef them up as much as we want. We had them like about 8 cores, 16 gig memory, and 2 of them, and they run like hell. Where you also, the Power BI data gateway was also hosted on-prem. Beef that up as much as you want, the thing is shit, it doesn't work. You use it for a small report. It probably does work, but yeah, I don't like it. Yeah, so that was the part of it. I did my job. I got it there in, I got it down to X amount of time. Then the problem came, this lovely third party that I really like, they did their stuff in Data Factory. They had to move the data to the Power BI reports. Let's just say it went well at the beginning. They could do it within an hour or 2, so that meant this would run around 4 or 5 a.m. People could get their data and reports about 8 a.m. What ended up happening is over a period of time of a few months, I think it went to a good 9 to 12 hours per day. So I could load it within 12 minutes. After that, all their different, whatever they were doing in the Data Factory of checking data was going to, it was just extending. So the report wasn't even ready until about 10 p.m., which, yeah, who's going to want to know their business things at 10 p.m.? The thing started at 4 a.m. and starts again at 4 a.m. So yeah, I was okay. This was insane. So then I came along again. I was like, okay, let me see what I can do. Instead of using the copy data activity, they were using data flows, but they weren't doing anything to the data. So, and also with that, you wait 4 minutes for like a Spark cluster to spin up and then move the data. It could be, 10 meg, or it could be a gig, but you're waiting 4 minutes to do jack shit and then ship it. Yeah, okay, get rid of that. We're not doing it, let's use copy data. CDS, I can't even remember what it stands for, but also one of these lovely things I like. It's a database, it's called Dataverse, I think now, or whatever it's called. Yeah. I don't say good things about it. This was one of the main things that slowed it down because the throughput is insanely slow. And what they did was move the data, and I have no idea why, but some crazy architect who left very suddenly after this project came up with this idea of moving from Azure SQL into this CDS database and then back, so they could compare on daily compare the data. But that was and they did that multiple times to check different parts of data through one stream, and that took hours. So we minimized that by. I did it quite easily. I wouldn't suggest doing it, but you can do. I created 2 tables. And then if the data hadn't changed between yesterday and today by doing like a merge insert, is there any differences? Okay, only give me the differences. There's a million ways to do it. This was just easy because I could, this wasn't our problem to fix. I was putting a bandage on it, so I'm not going to go all over the place unless they want to give us the full contract. But yeah, that's the way it works. So I was like, okay, I can help you, and I did. And that cut the time down, I think, from 3 hours to we got it in about 10 minutes moving the data. So that's always a big difference. One got you with the stored procedures. What they did was trigger hundreds of stored procedures, one after another. Data Factory didn't play nice with that. And you don't, and with Azure SQL managed instance, I think it was being used, you don't have SQL Server agent, so you can't just say, okay, ping this SQL agent job, and you do the rest, so it's all kept within SQL. Data Factory would make the call, that takes a few seconds. Okay, run this stored procedure, have you ran, yes or no, that takes a few seconds, and you have that hundreds of times. Or I think there was 600 something stored procedure calls they were doing back and forth, and you count these X amount of seconds, it was taking hours for this to run. So I did a really dirty script of just banging all the stored procedures in one. Okay, this is the column you need, boom, hit it, and just log in between. If it breaks, then find out where it actually broke. Dirty, but worked. And that cut the time down from like 4 hours to, I think, 30 minutes. But then I also told them split it. So you're searching all the data in one area, split the data into many parts, and then they had 3 streams, and then, yeah, instead of being 3 hours, it took 1 hour per stream. There you go, that just took quick maths. Yeah, I explained the limit data daily compare. That was the CDS crap. Well, you check before, check after. That really made a big difference to how they were importing or moving the data to CDS, because it was needed, because they do stuff with Power Apps. There's a certain model-driven app which needs CDS, which sucks. But apparently Azure SQL will be integrated at one point, which I'll be shoving that straight up there when they need it. And housekeeping, clean up the crap, because what they were doing was that CDS thing was growing like hell and they had no way of deleting it. So what we have now is a PowerShell script to delete from CDS, which is also hell. It deletes so fucking slow, it's horrible. But that runs from a automation, what's it called? Automation thingy, majiggy. And it's just a PowerShell script that runs. But the only thing is, it can only run for 3 hours, and that's something which Azure has. So it'd be better off in your own like DevOps pipeline or a different way. But they gave me the script, and I said, okay, I can integrate it through this, and I can publish it out through test, acceptance, and prod, and it works. But yeah, it's not probably the best solution if you want to clean up CDS, because 3 hours, and if it takes so long, not always the best. But after all that, it then ran in 2 hours. So we had a 12 minutes upload time to the storage account, 2 hours runtime. That started around 4 a.m., 8 a.m., bang, your report's there. I was the legend for a moment. But yeah, other than that, that is me. So please, if you have any questions, yes.
Why Leicester?
Why Leicester? That's where I'm from. You sort of been. Yeah, I maybe skipped that part, but I'm English, and I was born in Leicester. So yeah, they were a good football team once upon a time. People remember years ago. And yeah, the guy who did it was Claudio Ranieri, and we had a lot of Italian fans coming over. Yeah? I remember I still lived there, and there was over 1,000 Italians came over just because Claudio Ranieri was the manager. And we're like, where are you staying? Yeah, nowhere. We just came for the party. I was like, wow, okay. But yeah, that was a fun time. They've gone a bit downhill now, but yeah, that's why Leicester. Yeah, yeah. My son has got a few Ajax things. Yeah.
So I don't think CDS was never thought for big data.
No.
And also very expensive to put big data. So that decision.
It was the first time I've ever seen it, and I've never seen a good thing come out of it. Obviously, it was small data, it could work, but the way...
Business applications,
I don't think this company had ever dealt with data like that, or the architect hadn't who put this together, because he thought everything would work, and even the Power BI reports, I think they're limited to like 10 gig data set. And I already told him in email, I've just read this online, how are you going to squeeze 60 gig in there? No, it'll be fine. Yeah, it didn't, it broke. They had 10, 12 data sets, and they had to like, trying to publish to them and split it, and it was... same with CDS. It worked at the beginning, but then it was just like not keeping it the data limited, so it just grew X amount, like a stupid amount. It just slowed down so bad, because then they were trying to import all that X amount, and they weren't limiting the data they pulling back. So you're trying to pull all that back, and it just got slower every day.
I don't remember for sure, but I think it was very expensive to deploy so many data. So paying a lot for something to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, they could have done everything in Azure SQL. It was just this one application or whatever, and I'm sure there must have been a better way of doing it. And this whole slowdown shouldn't rely on one application that has to be triggered to CDS. That's crazy for me, but that was out of my scope.
Yeah, we now have the same issue as you mentioned before. So we pull data from the external sources. Wipe all the data we have right now. That's not my application. And then fill it with a new one, which also causes a lot of problems. Because we also use log, whatever log. Yeah. So we use this, and somebody tried to change something in there, and he changed the name of one field, and everything just broke in the application in one day. Because the structure changed. Because they wiped everything, filled with new broken data, and like all the customers are calling us. It's a wrong client. We select wrong ID of the client, whatever is happening there. Yeah. So we also now thinking about how to change this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, the wrong client, because these guys also, they didn't listen to the people who designed it in the first place. So they were like, no, we're going to choose this ID for the customer. Yeah, well, that changed every day because this other company wiped it every day. They did some weird shit. And so, yeah, they ended up having all these customers accessing different data. They were like, we told you this at the beginning. Like, okay. Yeah. But yeah.
Why are the 100 storage procedures?
No, not really. What they were doing was verifying the data, like, is it way above what it should be? So yesterday it was worth €1, now it's worth 1 million euros. Okay, something is a bit weird there. But they ended up moving from table to table, checking this, checking that, and it was just, wow, it was a mess. And some of the things I saw in there, I was like, why are you doing this? And then what they also did was the same processes then after to do like it was called, in Dutch it was hervalidatie, it was like a revalidation or something. But that also involved then CDS pulling all the data back again and going through it and...
Like a checksum, their own way of checksum.
Yeah, but it was really bad. I would never want to work with them in that way. It was a very bad design.
Okay, so in the situation where you change the infrastructure to like, okay, not using the CDS anymore.
Yep.
How then do you compare the data to validate that, okay, what you have is what should be presented to your clients?
Different table in Azure SQL, so keep it all in there. So if you need to, all they were using it was as a table. I have no, they chose it, so then what the customer could do was go in there and actually manually check it and verify it. But they built it in this modern-driven app that had to use CDS. But what I would have done if there must be something out there which can access Azure SQL in that sense. I know Power Apps can, but it's not the model-driven one, so you probably have to build it yourself. But then you just ship it to another table, like I did. I then had a table which was, say, yesterday or the last 6 months, I think I built it as. Okay, check it against the last 6 months. Has anyone changed it? Has anyone said yes or no? Or has the data changed? And then just do a merge between them. So insert, delete, and do it like that.
How do you check that the data is changed or not?
The merge does it, so the merge does basically a compare, which is playing with a bit of fire, because if you go for a stupid amount of data, it could break, so that's why I told them it's a bandage. It wasn't my, if I've redesigned it, then it'll be a different thing, but a good way to check, I think it was only a few hundred, no, not a few hundred, a few million rows. It could do it within about 10 seconds. And what it would do, I don't really like merges. I'd rather split it where you can actually, you select, insert or delete. There's a lot of, going into the SQL background, there's a lot of bad things can happen with merges over the SQL years. There's a lot of, let's say, bugs in the script. But all it would do is, if the data is changed, merge it, delete it, or insert. Yeah, that's all it basically does. So just you supply 2 tables in there. It will change.
I'm not very familiar with SQL.
It's just a command. So as you can select from a table, you can also you choose merge, and you say 2 tables, and you define the columns you want it to actually check, and it will check both tables and just do a compare and make them as one. Do that. So. And then I just added logging in there because you also, it's okay handily doing that, but how do you know what's changed? So rather than, yeah, I can do that into CDS, but then CDS isn't going to know what I've just merged. So I just did a simple thing of added a new column and say, okay, add 1 when you've merged, if you've merged. So that means it's change CDS can then pick it up saying, okay, only give me all the 1s, basically, and that limited bringing the data up. And yeah, there's many ways to do it. That's just a quick, easy way. And then you just basically, after you've done the upload, wipe the table, as in like put it all back to 0 or something like that. So then the next merge will then add the 1s. You do the same thing.
So you don't check it manually?
Fuck no. No. I order everything's from what you learn, like Schubert, where everything has to be automated. You don't want to any task like that. You're doing something wrong. Like you need and just fully automate everything. If it goes wrong, you should be alerted on it, and you should build an alert which should tell you on it. Not that I should physically. No way, man. I'm spending my time wrong if I'm doing that.
Yeah. In case you have millions and millions of
Yeah. Yeah. So we just alert on it, or say if something broke, and then we know. And then we you build the pipelines to say if it's if it breaks, if it errors, then send us an alert, or do something else. Then you can do this whole mapping structure. In that sense. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, you can, because where you have like the activity, you have different streams, and you can say if it breaks or no, you even go to the next one. If it's good, it's a little green arrow, you just draw, and that's why I was having a conversation just before. With Data Factory, you build it all clickety-click, and then you can do the code afterwards, which is pretty nice. All you have to do is build the infrastructure as code of the Data Factory, because Data Factory itself resides on its own like repository, being the internals. So we have that in the development environment actually writes to the repository, and then all we do for test and acceptance is the pipeline would pick it up and deploy that to test, acceptance, and prod. And it makes a really quick stream and quick development then, because I'm just clicking around and doing it. You can do it in JSON and whatever, but it depends how much you want to go into it. But it makes it fast.
How much is it easy to kind of duplicate the pipeline?
If you want to recreate it or something like that, or
if I want to keep the first one and
yep.
create the second one with different elements, or start with
Yeah. Even changing data factories. You can just you export the whole pipeline and import it, and it will be exactly how you had it, and it will bring all its dependencies with it. It was fucking nice. So all the data sources you had, all those different things, it's not like, okay, you bring the copy activity and you're like, oh, I've got to redo everything. No, it brings a whole shebang as like a little file that you put on your local laptop. Okay, let me import it to this data factory. And even in the same, like I had the window, where is it? Woo! Let's go back. Where you have that copy data activity, you can just like Control-C, Control-V, Control-C, Control-V, and then you can have as many as you want, or you can dynamically do it like that third party did, which is a bit of magic. They have a JSON file stored in a storage account. The copy data activity will read from that storage account and then do a loop on it, and it just creates about 20, 30 copy activities, which I've never done before, but I was like, wow, that's pretty. That was one good thing they did. It's insane how much you can do with it, because for us, we also automated the call of the second data factory, because we have 2 data factories. Okay, well, when one is finished, how's the second one going to know I need to go? So we had a web API that calls a API of Data Factory to actually kick off the script, but we kept all the strings in like a key vault, and then we have it from DevOps, is it library? Variable thing, you can change it in there, the pipeline picks it up, moves it to key vault, and then Data Factory can read it from key vault. Oh, fucking, this is magic, it goes all this way, and yeah, there's a lot you can do. And I'm still, yeah, I think you're forever learning when you get into this realm. But quick side note, I was heavily involved with Synapse recently, and if you've not heard of that, it's like the bigger, older brother, sister of Data Factory. It's all based on Data Factory. The whole back end is. If you're moving data like this, stick to Data Factory. We had a lot of bugs in Synapse and still do. We mainly wanted to use it because you could do notebooks, and instead of building, what is the name of that thing? Some data Goliath thing, I can't remember the name of it now, the word has just gone out of my head. But that basically, you span up the Spark clusters and you can run it on there. Databricks. So instead of having Databricks, you could have it in Synapse, but word of advice, I would always do Databricks and Data Factory, not Synapse. Synapse needs to mature. Yes, I do not work for Microsoft, I will slate them. Thank you.